Guys, time for today's On Texas Football post-scrimmage update. CJ Vogel and Jeff Howe out at DKR earlier today listening to Steve Sarkisian's post-scrimmage update. CJ, Jeff, welcome in. Thank y'all for joining us. Let's give the folks what they want. CJ, let's start with the reemergence or rehabilitation of Cedric Baxter, because yet again, Steve Sarkisian spent some real time listening and talking about CJ Baxter and what he's done this fall.
Yeah, earlier in the week, I believe last week even, I kind of put up the post on Texas Football saying maybe we need to recalculate our expectations for CJ Baxter early in the year. Of course, I was on the side that maybe we wouldn't see him necessarily all too much. Well, according to Steve Sarkisian today, his workload increased, as well as, Sarkisian midweek after the scrimmage a week ago sat down with CJ Baxter and said, all right, it's time to ramp this up a little bit. I like what I'm seeing. Sark said that he was trying to be overly cautious with the way that Texas utilized CJ Baxter in the scrimmage a week ago, and he thought maybe even going into the season that would be the case. Well, after today and that workload increase, seeing how Baxter really responded to getting hit, as well as just being able to bounce back from that injury. Well, it sounds like Texas is about to see a lot more of CJ Baxter early in the year than maybe he anticipated. And the other thing on top of this, he was asked, could you see any of your backs getting 20, 25 touches a game? He said there probably isn't a real need for that. We got a 1A, we got a 1B. He mentioned that with Trey Wisner. He mentioned that with CJ Baxter. Texas, with Baxter, I think, is a different football team offensively, and it's trending in that direction.
Hey, Jeff, let's stay with the running backs, if you don't mind, right now. Trey Wisner, they're being a little cautious with him right now, apparently. And then also Sark talked a little bit about James Simon, Christian Clark a little bit as well today.
Yeah, so real quick on the injury front, Sark said there was a couple guys they had to shut down. Trey Wisner was one of them. Jelani McDonald, Trevor Gooseby basically said if this was a game, all three of those guys probably would have been able to go back in, but there was no reason to push it for a couple of reasons. And we'll get to the one with Trevor Gooseby and Jaden Chapman later. But, yeah, he was talking about explosive plays. He mentioned Christian Clark had some explosive plays. James Simon was responsible for some of those explosive plays. So we talked about this, Bobby, throughout camp. That number 3 running back, and he did say today, Sark did say today, he basically considers Wisner and Baxter co-starters. Who's going to be that third back? It sounds like with camp, for all intents and purposes, over, it sounds like they're going to go into Ohio State prep with Christian Clark as the number 3 back behind those two guys, not Jared Gibson.
Yes, it does. You mentioned those injuries. Murad Watson, we believe, was held out as well today. We don't know the severity of that situation. Emmett Mosley, the transfer from Stanford, did not practice or scrimmage today either, and neither did Jonah Williams, for what we're hearing. But Sark did say, quote unquote, from the scrimmage, no quote unquote catastrophic injuries. Hey, y'all mentioned Jaden Chapman filling in for Trevor Gooseby at left tackle. What did y'all hear on that today from Sark?
Yeah, that was really what I was interested to hear from Sark. So I asked him, hey, when Gooseby went down, who was that first guy up? Was it Nick Brooks? Was it Jaden Chapman? And according to Steve Sarkisian, it was Jaden Chapman who got that run at left tackle with the first team. Of course, we've heard a lot about Nick Brooks so far. It appears that battle for the third offensive tackle position is ongoing. But look, Texas being very cautious with their franchise guy, Trevor Gooseby being one of them. But ultimately, Sark said Jaden Chapman stepped in, played well, gave the offense what it needed at that tackle position. And again, in practice, whether you're with the first or the second team, you're going against some of the best edge rushers in all of the country. In that room specifically, it doesn't matter if you're a first, second, or third stringer. When you see Colin Simmons, Colton Vosick, Brad Spence go down the list, you're getting tested pretty easily.
You just mentioned some of the depth of that defense, and Sark talked about that today as well, Jeff Howe.
Yeah, real quick on the offensive line, Sark was asked which positions he's concerned as far as depth goes. He mentioned the O-line was pretty much the only one at this point, and I think it stands to reason because when you look at that group, when Gooseby elevated now to being a starter, Cole Hudson back in the starting lineup, Neto's now a starter, Brendan Baker, basically all the guys that were your backup guys now, they're starters. So you need a Jaden Chapman, a Nick Brooks, a Nate Kibble. You need some of those guys to step up. I just don't know if Sark feels like those guys are there yet. And it makes sense, Bobby, because we haven't seen those guys on the field. And, he mentioned it today. if Gooseby has a situation where he needs to come out of the game, who's going to be the first tackle off the bench? Would it be Nick Brooks as a true freshman? They're giving Jaden Chapman a chance to prove himself. It sounds like Sark saw like he saw today. On defense, Sark did feel like, based on the naked eye, that the tackling was a little bit better last week than this week, and I think that's a byproduct of some of the things we've talked about throughout the week. The offense was a little more creative, got the ball out into space a little bit more, created more one-on-one situations. But I think, Bobby, the thing that stood out to me defensively were two things. One, Sark said they missed some opportunities in the red zone, so that means the defense, when it counts, is kind of bowing their neck a little bit. But he talked about Manny Muhammad. He said he really challenged Malik Muhammad this week to get ready. It basically sounds like he didn't mention names, but it sounds like he's getting him in the mindset, hey, you better be ready to go one-on-one with Jeremiah Smith and Carnell Tate in 2 weeks. He said Muhammad really responded well, had a really good week of practice, good scrimmage today, liked what he saw to Malik Muhammad. So, that's a guy we've talked about, Bobby, pretty much since the end of the season up until now. He got picked on at the end of last year. How was he going to respond? I've said all offseason, I feel like we're going to find out pretty early that Malik Muhammad's still a really good football player. So I consider that positive news that he answered the challenge Sark put in front of him this week.
Yeah, if I can build on Manny Muhammad just a little bit, the way I kind of understood what Sark was saying there is that I wanted to test him to give him some confidence. And that's exactly what Texas did today. He said part of the game plan offensively going into today was to target Malik Muhammad and to give him those reps against a Ryan Wingo, a DeAndre Moore, a Parker Livingstone. And by all accounts, according to Steve Sarkisian today and sources I've heard from already behind the scenes, Malik Muhammad stepped up. And he had himself another really solid scrimmage. Of course, we talked about him being a guy a week ago that's had another really solid scrimmage as well. But on top of that, look, you need that cornerback one with that cornerback one confidence, especially with the Jeremiah Smith or Carnell Tate lining up opposite of you to start the season. Texas trying to manufacture that right now with Malik Muhammad. It sounds like it's working.
Talk about wide receiver one. It sounds like Ryan Wingo is trying to become that wide receiver one. We heard from behind the scenes, our Blake Monroe reporting that Wingo had another terrific day of scrimmage. Sark, he was the first wide receiver out of his mouth today as well. What are y'all hearing, and what did y'all find interesting that Sark had to say about Ryan Wingo?
Ooh, it's going to be very difficult for any cornerback across the country to completely subdue him. Texas, again, whether it be last week, whether it be this week, the big plays are becoming synonymous with Ryan Wingo. And that was a lot of what we saw in the first half of the season a year ago. He actually spoke about it on Thursday saying, maybe I hit a wall. I don't know necessarily when that came, but certainly that second half of the season wasn't where I wanted to finish. It sounds like Texas is getting him back into a rhythm again. Those 15 to 30-yard plays that we've talked about, those big chunk plays, it sounds like right now he's just a total machine in creating those for the Texas offense. And again, he's going against what we believe to be a very talented Texas secondary.
Jeff,
I think his rapport with Arch Manning, Bobby, I don't think we talk about that enough. The reps they banked together, working with the twos all last summer throughout camp and then throughout the season. I think we're going to see that early. And you go back to the UTSA game too, and even the ULM game, one of Arch's favorite targets last year, the two games he played a lot, was Ryan Wingo. So that's the rapport between those two. I think is going to be what the passing game hinges on quite a bit early on.
Reminder, people are just now joining us. Several hundred people have joined us in the last 3 or 4 minutes. I just want to say Emmett Mosley was out today at wide receiver. Also, Jonah Williams was out. We believe Murad Watson was also out for whatever reason. And then 3 guys suffered some level of injuries. Sark, I think, termed it nicked up. Trevor Gooseby out with a hand, but he would be back if they were still playing today. Jelani McDonald and then Trey Wisner as well. If we're playing real football game today, Sark said, they would have been back out there. So that at least gives y'all a sense of what we're talking about. Hey, Sark was a little disappointed in the defense. It sounded from a turnover perspective. Said the defense only really caused 1 turnover, and it wasn't really the defense causing it. It was a center fumble exchange. Anything to make of that? He also said, and I love this quote from him, you emphasize what you get. What you emphasize as a coach is what you get. And he felt like last week he didn't emphasize pre-snap penalties enough. This week, he said they only had 2 throughout the entire practice, whereas last week with illegal motion as well as just illegal procedure, et cetera. They had upwards of 10, and they got that down to 2. CJ, what did you think of that?
Well, first off, I'm taking this from an offensive side of things. That's a huge win. Now, I reported a few weeks ago, Bobby, that Texas is going under center a little bit more in fall camp than maybe what we've seen under Sark in years past. So that center to quarterback exchange, that needs to be tightened up, especially if that's going to be the case in the fall. But ultimately, when you're playing a front seven that creates as much havoc as this Texas defense does, to hear only one turnover, and quite frankly, it might not have necessarily been created by the defense, that's huge. That is ball security. That is the team doing its job, not putting the ball in harm's way. I think the sacks, I think the negative plays, I think the havoc plays defensively will come. Ultimately, to hear that, one, the offense bounced back from a week ago when pre-snap penalties killed them, and two, maybe it was very sluggish to start off the scrimmage. To hear that that was remedied today, that's a big sigh of relief as well. Jeff, I wanted to leave some of those pre-snap penalties to you because Sark mentioned that, hey, that was a big bonus for what we saw on the field today from the offense as well.
Yeah, Bobby, you mentioned it. Sark just felt like going into scrimmage one, he really kind of boo-booed, for lack of a better term, the pre-snap stuff. And it was a really, really big issue last week. I think he said there were 10 to 15 pre-snap issues, pre-snap penalties in the scrimmage last week. He said he when he got to the mic, he said he could only remember 2 in this scrimmage. And you're talking about a 100-plus play scrimmage, only 2 pre-snap penalties. So that's the kind of discipline this offense is going to need. When Texas gets ready for one of these big road games, poise and composure are the 2 big words Sark uses to describe the mentality you need on offense. That's the kind of stuff that limits illegal shifts, offensive linemen not holding their water. You got to be poised. You got to have composure. We know it's going to be loud. It's going to be raucous. You're going to have first game jitters. So the conditions will be ripe for pre-snap penalties in Columbus 2 weeks from now. Limiting those is going to be really big. And to piggyback off what you guys were talking about on the turnovers, the phrase Sark used was he felt like there were opportunities to create more turnovers. That tells me, look, if a guy's got a chance to get his hand up in a passing lane and tip a ball, do it. If you got a chance to break on a ball, make that break, make a play on the ball. So, look, there are going to be opportunities open up because when you start playing games against a team that doesn't know what you do day in and day out, you're going to get them with a coverage that they haven't seen or a front they haven't seen, a blitz they haven't seen, whatever it is. But that said, you need to get in the habit of, hey, when a ball's in your area, try to get a hand on it, try to knock it down, try to tip it, whatever the case. So I think that's more of what Sark was talking about. Just be a little bit more aggressive when those opportunities pop up to create turnovers.
Couple of more notes as we went into this camp, Jerry, CJ, and Jeff. What we were talking about are things that we wanted to find out what Texas or where Texas was at. We talked about the nickel position. What's Texas going to do there? Is it Michael Taft? Is it Jelani McDonald? Or is it the freshman Grayson Littleton? We talked about the second tight end alongside Jack injuries. And then we talked about the backup quarterback. Here's some news and notes that I have at that point. Grayson Littleton played with the 2s for the most of the day at the nickel, but then rotated in with the 1s. Also, that means Michael Taft started at nickel. Jalen Gilbo started at corner opposite Manny Muhammad. Also, Jack Injuries was one of the tight ends, and Spencer Shannon continues to be the other tight end in 12 personnel out of the gate. That means Jordan Washington remaining primarily with the second team. We'll see if that sticks or if Washington becomes more of a receiving threat in that category. And then at quarterback, we're hearing that Matt Caldwell, a young man out of Troy, transferred in, took reps with the 2s today. That's the first time that has happened in a scrimmage scenario for the Longhorns. But CJ, you also heard that KJ Lacey had yet another really good practice.
Yeah, this is, again, 2 practices in a row where it sounds like KJ Lacey is really starting to create and establish long-lasting drives, too. Today, he ran with a lot of I was told a lot of members of the first team offense today in a 2-minute situation in which he moved the team down the field, got into a field goal range, and Texas ultimately made the kick. So a big bonus there. I go back to earlier in the week, Bobby, I asked 2 sources to give me one word to describe KJ Lacey. The first was elusive. The second was a gamer. And I think Texas is seeing that on the practice field when the bullets are flying live time, very evidently with KJ Lacey. So it sounds like he might be someone to watch in this quarterback 2 battle early on.
Yeah, if they're wanting to redshirt him, but Matthew Caldwell seems to be the guy right now. overtaking what it looks like is Trey Owens. But Sark did not mention that officially. I want to put that out there. That's just our read of the situation from hearing what we heard behind the scenes at scrimmages. Other news and notes before we got a couple questions we're going to get to of you guys. Sark, besides the Wingo, Moore, and Livingstone, he did mention Dalen McCutcheon as well as Khalik Lockett as having solid days. I think that's important to note. And then he also talked a little bit about all 4 linebackers.
Yes.
He thinks are starting level players for the University of Texas. That includes obviously Leon Galafau and Anthony Hill, the starters, but also Trey Moore and Ty Anthony Smith, who seem to be doing well. All right, a couple questions here, and I don't know if we have all of the answers quite yet, but this is pretty simple. Based on y'all's take of what Sark said, who won the scrimmage, offense or defense?
Oh, now compared to a week ago, I would lean towards the offense. It does sound like the offense had a better day. Defense still held their own in the red area. Is that some hangover effect for the Texas red zone from a year ago? We'll have to wait and see. But it does sound like the offense definitely bounced back and had a much stronger day, much faster starting day as well.
Yeah, no, I guess, forced turnovers by the defense, and we haven't heard at this point that there was any, especially like last week where the defense just kind of stormed the gates early on. None of that. So, yeah, based on what we heard last week and the very, very early returns this week, I'll give the edge to the offense.
Yeah, we were hearing the defense suffocated the offense out of the gate last week. We did not hear that this week, at least not thus far. It sounds like, and this leads me into this. It's pretty good inference here. It sounds, from all things theology, it sounds like the skilled position did better due to the struggles of the tackling. Am I right in that? This is the old, there is no, it's a zero-sum game. If the offense does well for Texas, that means the defense did poorly for Texas. But Sark did mention the struggles of tackling compared to last week as well. All right, let's do this, because Sark did mention this, guys. How was the special teams performance? Jeff, I know you heard that question be asked of Sark earlier today.
Yeah, Sark said he probably needed to go back and check the tape just to be sure. And they were mixing guys in and out. So in terms of what was the first field goal unit and how did it look, he did say field goal kicking was pretty good. They did have a kick block, which that might sound like a negative, but he looked at it as a positive. I think Bobby, he and Jeff Banks want to get back to where the special teams unit was a couple of years ago, where you're really aggressive coming after kicks and setting the tone on special teams. So I think the fact that they had a field goal block today, based on what Sark said and using his logic, I'll take that as a positive. Right now, it sounds like Mason Shipley probably going to be the field goal kicker in Columbus, but I don't know, Bobby, that's decided as of right now.
Yeah, I think they're trying to figure all of that out. Sark actually also mentioned kickoffs. They worked on everything today. So they worked with Will Stone kicking off, et cetera. I think that the special teams should be better this year, because they're actually going to have a punter that averages about a half second more hang time and about 5 more yards in distance on average. All right, S. Williams has a super chat here for us. Thank you, S. Williams. How's that O-line looking? Plug and play, dudes. Going to give Arch the time he needs. Y'all go back over what happened with Trevor Gooseby real quick for people that missed that section of the discussion from earlier in this one.
Yeah, Trevor Gooseby cautiously held out today a little bit, got dinged up at some point during the practice. Sark said if this was a real game, he would have been back out there. But it was Jaden Chapman who went into left tackle, not Nick Brooks, who we've heard a lot about since he arrived on campus back in January, that stepped in and really gave the Longhorns what they needed at the left tackle position as well. Sark said ultimately it's good that this happened now, right? Get some real life experience against, a front seven that's pretty talented before going to Ohio State, or, name an SEC opponent essentially. But ultimately it does sound like that offensive line, at least today, held up pretty well in pass protection. I haven't yet heard if that is a big reason for pessimism moving forward. It sounds like in relation to last week, the offensive line had a much stronger day as well.
All right, good stuff. All right, hey, Blake Monroe already has a article up about today's workout scrimmage. Make sure you check us out over at ontexasfootball.com. Become an OTF OG. We're going to be dropping notes there from the scrimmage all day today on texasfootball.com. Use the promo code OTFOG at checkout and get 1 year subscription for $39.95. You won't find a better deal out there than that for 1 year of access. You also get the message boards, etc. Again, that's on texasfootball.com. Jeff and CJ, before we close out this episode of On Texas Football Live, you guys have any final thoughts on this second scrimmage and second and final scrimmage of the Longhorns this training camp?
Well, first and foremost for me, I need to include Khalid Kalakit. 4th down conversion on a double move. Sounds like he's really coming into his own. We've talked about him coming or having a strong summer. Sounds like he's kind of picked that back up as fall camp has continued. So if that's a guy Texas can get, some vertical ability with this fall as well, that would be huge for the Longhorns. But ultimately, ball security was good. And by all accounts, so far, maybe it comes up a little bit later, offensive line protection was good. That is the recipe offensively for a winning football team when we know this defense is as talented as it is.
Jeff, how?
I'll go with the fact that I heard what I needed to hear from the offense today. Sounds like it was a much better, much cleaner scrimmage than it was last week. As far as the big picture goes, and Sark mentioned this, we all get caught up on who's the starters, who's your starting 11 on offense, who's your starting 11 on defense. I think I need to get my head right for this, so I'm not singling anybody out, but the fact that if you're going to win a national championship, you're playing 16, 17 games. Sark is playing the long game when he talks about the talent and starting caliber guys on this roster. Look, however you slice it, and we talk about those backup offensive linemen, there's a really good chance Jaden Chapman or Nick Brooks will go over to defense. Ty Anthony Smith, Cade Phillips, Kobe Black, Warren Roberson, some of the guys Sark mentioned today. Those guys are going to have to help Texas win a football game at some point this year. So, really, we talk about how deep this roster is, and it's really deep and it's really talented. But I think Sark, the fun part for him and the staff is figuring out as you go which guys are surging, which guys are taking advantage of player development, which guys as the staff having fun developing, because at some point late in the year, guys that we are not thinking about right now are going to be the difference between Texas getting back into the playoff or sitting at home in the summer.
That wind really picking up out there. I kind of wonder if that had any effect on the scrimmage or if you're just in a wind tunnel right now, Jeff. But we appreciate you guys very, very much. CJ, Jeff, we'll be back later today with more. Again, we'll also have more on texasfootball.com. That's going to do it for this live stream. Immediate reaction following Steve Sarkisian's post-scrimmage, press availability for Jeff Howe, CJ Vogel, as well as our producer, Matt Hutchinson. I'm Bobby Burton. This has been On Texas Football. Hook 'em.